Hello and welcome to a two-part series on getting started with E-MapReduce on Alibaba Cloud. Log into your Alibaba Cloud account and go to the console. Scroll down and choose the E-MapReduce service under the Analysis option. To use the E-MapReduce service, you must have a default EMR role. If you haven't set this up already, you will see this warning. In that case, click Go to RAM and set one up by clicking Confirm Authorization Policy. You now have a role set in Resource Access Management, or RAM. Now, let's make sure we have an access key. Hover over your username in the menu bar and click Access Keys on the drop-down. Ignore the Security Tips pop-up window and click Continue to manage access key. Create access key. Now we'll set up Object Storage Service, or OSS, which we also need for E-MapReduce. Go to the Products page, select Object Storage Service, and click Buy Now. Agree to the terms and enable the service. Wait while the purchase completes. Once OSS is set up, go to the Object Storage console. Create a bucket for E-MapReduce to use. Fill in the bucket details. Now, we'll set up the log configuration on the bucket. Click through to the bucket you just created. Go to the Basic Settings tab, scroll down, and enable Log Storage. You now have an OSS bucket ready for E-MapReduce with the logs set up. Move on to Part 2 to learn how to create a cluster and run your job. In Part 2, we'll cover creating a cluster and a job, and creating an execution plan to run your job. To create a cluster, go back to the console and select E-MapReduce. This time, you should go directly to the E-MapReduce console. Before clicking Create Cluster, make sure you are in the correct region. For the purposes of this tutorial, we have chosen Frankfurt. The Cluster Configuration Settings page will come up. Keep the settings as they are for now. Click Next to go to the Hardware Settings tab, where you have to set up the following services that the cluster requires: a Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC, a Virtual Switch, or vSwitch, and a Security Group. First, let's set up the VPC and vSwitch. Click Create VPC/subnet and create a VPC. Make sure you are in the correct region. Continue to Manage to vSwitch. Give the vSwitch a name and add the zone and CIDR settings. Now, go back to the cluster hardware settings and add the VPC/vSwitch details you just created. If you slide the New Security Group button to green, the system will create a default security group for you. Then click Next to go through to the Basic Configuration tab. On this tab, you can give the cluster a name, set the log path, the one we set up earlier in the OSS, and click to authorize the instance roles. You must also set up a password for the cluster. To set the log path, click the folder at the end of the log path entry and input the details. Create the login password and click OK to create the cluster. Once you have clicked OK, you are sent to the E-MapReduce console, where you will see the cluster being created. The creating process might take a while. Be patient. Once the cluster is created, it will have an idle status showing in the console. Your cluster is now ready for work. Now let's create a job. As an example, we will run the SparkPy calculation on the cluster. On the E-MapReduce console, select Jobs and click Create Job. Enter the job configuration settings. Give the job a name and select Spark as the job type. Then, add the following parameters. These tell Spark to run the SparkPy class from the Spark examples jar. Check the Spark version is correct and click OK. If you're not sure, you can check the Spark version details on the Cluster Configuration Management page. Your SparkPy job is now ready to run on the cluster. In order to run a job on the cluster, you have to set up an execution plan Go to Execution Plan and click Create Execution Plan. Choose from an existing cluster, for example, the one we just set up. Select the cluster and click Next. You will see a list of jobs to choose from. Select the jobs you want to run. Move the jobs to the Configured Job column and click Next. Give the execution plan a name and click OK. Back in the Execution Plan page, click Run Now. Go ahead and execute. The execution plan will run all the jobs in its job list. We can see that the execution plan is running. Let's check to see if the execution plan ran the job successfully by checking the logs. Click More, then choose Running Log from the drop-down menu. On the Running Log page, click View Job List. You will see a list of the jobs running in the execution plan. For this example, Standard Out should print the result of the Spark pod calculation. Click Standard Out. Spark has correctly approximated pi with our cluster. That's it. The cluster has done its job and is now idle again. If you find you don't need your cluster anymore, simply go over to the Cluster Details page in the E-MapReduce console and release it. Thank you for watching. Log into your account and head to the main console to get started now with E-MapReduce on Alibaba Cloud.